Revenge. It's one of the most consistently utilized character motivations in all of media, since the likes of Samson and Hamlet, and an especially common inciting incident for narratives in gaming. Whether it's a cheap way to get the audience to care, or a true study in cycles of violence, gamers have been eating up and acting out digital revenge for decades. While one game we'll look at today is notorious for its revenge plots, I want to look at how it relates to another game whose story is rarely looked at with the same level of care, Assassin's Creed Origins. While the game itself is particularly beloved and was a jumpstart to a new era of Assassin's Creed, Bayek's quest for revenge is what fuels everything. So let's talk revenge, modern versus ancient, personal versus societal, and nuanced versus clean-cut by comparing the arcs of Bayek, Ellie, and Abby in Assassin's Creed Origins and The Last of Us Part 2. How does revenge affect our protagonists and the worlds they've come to find themselves in? How do the conventions of each game's tone and genre shape the way revenge is portrayed? And before we get into this, I just want to say, a lot of major talking points around The Last of Us Part 2 have been analyzed and discussed to death, so I won't go into as much trouble to delve deep into them on their own, and instead focus on comparison and contrast with Origins. If you want to hear me go more in depth with an all-around character analysis of Ellie, check out my video, Why Are We Obsessed with Children Saving the World? Still, revenge is propelled by characterization. So let's start with the weight of revenge on our protagonists. Ellie, Abby, and Bayek are all seemingly more affected by the death of their loved ones than the acts they've committed in revenge, no matter how disturbing or violent they are.
Ellie's got PTSD quite badly, but the odd thing is that she still flashes back to Joel, and not to what she did to Owen and Mel, which I would have figured would be the far more traumatizing event at this point.
But when it comes to how they're affected, they all show legitimate PTSD reactions to things. Nightmares, flashbacks, changes in mood, appearance, and hopelessness or bloody tunnel vision.
You can't stop this.
Although the runtime of Origins exceeds Last of Us almost doubly, Bayek's emotional journey takes up much less time of it than Ellie's or Abby's. Especially when it comes to his cooldown after the death of Septimius.
I was wrong. I am responsible. When my boy died, I fought back with rage and anger. But this only made them stronger. We are all different, but we fought together to put Cleopatra on the throne. Now this was a mistake, my friends, but at least it brought us together.
Coming to this conclusion in seemingly minutes, one that takes Ellie years and hours of gameplay to get to. Bayek is generally pretty chill in the face of high emotion when it comes to the death of his targets. He knows what his purpose is and can't fundamentally be fazed by it. But Bayek has a different role than Ellie or Abby. He's a Magi, and that title allows him to take on different notions of right and wrong. Similar notions that WLF groupies Abby and Owen will unlearn over the course of their journey. Like Abby, Bayek loses people he loves, but finds new communities and ways to think about life and grief through his travels. As his quest is ending, it's bittersweet. Bayek is freeing his son, but losing him again at the same time. That's true of the conclusion to The Last of Us Part 2 as well. Ellie sitting down to play Joel a farewell and being unable to. This broken promise of their song. She leaves it and Joel for a new future, whatever it may be. Bayek completes his quest and is satisfied.
I have gone through shit to get our son out of the Duat. Khemu is at peace.
Abby completes it and isn't, but learns a new way through her grief. And Ellie doesn't complete her quest, but ultimately, I think she is satisfied in the end, as much as she can be. But of course, their quest for revenge don't just affect themselves. They change the remaining relationships in their lives too.
You and I are pledged to violence. Now. And always.
As with the previous section, The Last of Us Part 2 is much more focused on dramatizing this. At first, Bayek and Aya's quest for revenge brings them closer than it seems they have been for years, not only geographically, but emotionally. whereas the obsessions of Ellie, Abby, or Tommy force them to lose the people around them, even when not to death, by grinding them down with their tunnel vision, their inability to let go, their lies, and the ways revenge turned them into different, colder people. You can see the ways this affects Abby and Owen's relationship really clearly through the progression of flashbacks into her story. Her obsession with finding Joel seemingly broke up their relationship, despite Owen's unending love for her. Which is even sadder, as his protection of her from Ellie is what killed him, his girlfriend, and their unborn child. And he doesn't seem to fight Abby on it until much later, even after the revenge is complete.
Oh yeah, how do I do that? Should I go find the people that killed my family? Cut into them? I could torture them until they're crying, you know?
When everyone has had something like this done to them, people like Abby and Ellie aren't special in wanting revenge, but they are special for going after it, and not in a good way. Revenge really has a way of breaking up relationships, from Abby and Owen, to Tommy and Maria, Dina and Ellie, and also Bayek and Aya. But most similar to Abby and Owen, the two continue a playful working relationship. Aya's continued interest in the colonial powers that be set them apart at first, which allows them to realize it just doesn't work anymore.
Rome? You still entertain folly with these ambitions? I love you, Aya. And we are Magi. We do serve or protect, but we work alone. I share your hatred for Ptolemy. But remember, Cleopatra is a Ptolemy. She's the better of two evils.
We must serve greatness. What greatness do we serve now?
We are parents.
We were parents. I love you, Bayek of Siwa. But what are you of now?
They lost the things that kept them closest, and she actually ends up going down a much darker path than he. But Bayek and Aya's relationship brings up another interesting relation between the two games. Their interest in parent-child relationships, where one is grieving the loss of the other. And not only how important childhood is, but pregnancy. Obviously, the loss of innocence for children is a major theme in both games, with Kids and Jackson and WLF, and all the various side quests and origins that include helping vagrant kids in Rada. Both Joel and Bayek have lost children, and many side characters in Origins are looking for revenge for their lost parents, like Ellie and Abby. Dina and Mel are both pregnant in The Last of Us, as well as Timehotep in Origins, who's had many miscarriages and needs this pregnancy to go well. We also meet the crazed, grieving mother Calisette, who's trying to raise her daughter from the dead. To Bayek, the father of the child she helped kill, it's both sad and ironic.
I wanted to protect my daughter in life and death. I have done neither.
Instead, the mother we're most accustomed to at the end is Hanut, wife of Hotefres and mother of Shadia. Shadia instantly reminds us and Bayek of Hamu in her innocence and playfulness, but also how she's inadvertently involved in the uncovering of the identity of the crocodile. Wrong place, wrong time for good, naive kids, and dads getting in over their heads. Witnessing her death and her parents' grief stings, especially as it seems her death split her parents apart for a bit. But we'll come back to Hotefres later. Origins doesn't deal as much with cycles of violence, like the never-ending revenge dominoes of The Last of Us. But there is one story that stands out in that way. When we learn Taharka is the twist villain of Letopolis, a man who tortured his father-in-law and aided in the killing of Bayek's son, we know it's right to kill him. But we leave Kawab, his younger son, in a similar place to Ellie or Abby. Without a father and with a hole in his heart, he immediately thinks revenge.
I'll cut you down, like you did my father!
But the major difference is, not only these games have, but the way revenge functions in their worlds, are the sociopolitical differences between Ptolemaic Egypt and the post-apocalyptic US. In Bayek's world, revenge is entangled within political scandals of the time, and the abstract enemies of class and colonialism hang above every individual interaction. In The Last of Us, class and money don't exist in a tangible way anymore, and while we see the pitfalls of a number of different groups and tribes, those problems never stem from poor treatment of groups of their own people, aside from Levin Yar's apostate status. Whereas in Assassin's Creed, basically every dispute can be traced back to Roman rule.
You'll do what you're told, you lazy shit. If you need more grain, grow more. It's not my problem.
I know you are not extorting grain from this farmer, because you know that would be violating several Egyptian laws. As officials of Fayum, we both know it, don't we?
I take orders from above. If not me, someone else will do this. This is business. People pay what they owe, or I take it. It's not personal.
Others thought the way that you do. Then they murdered my son. Everything is personal. You filthy Nekatiadet! What is your stake in this? This is more about him than it is about your war.
My father grew figs in the Fayum. The best. The Ratos taxed him. An Egyptian has no choice but to pay. One season, the harvest was so poor that my father struggled to give his cut. The Ratos figured him for a cheat. He took a bite of fruit to prove his point. He got a mouthful of worms. His men laughed, but the Ratos was furious. I watched as my father was hanged from his own tree and picked at by every animal in the region. The Ratos embodies the unjust. He is why I am who I am. I need you, Bayek.
And we're never told to empathize with Roman forces in the way we're meant to understand the points of view of the WLF and the Seraphites. The only time we are allowed to kill without moral question in The Last of Us Part 2 is at the end with the Rattlers, who kinda work in the same way the general fleets of Roman soldiers do. Not only killing without empathy, but genuine, righteous justification of it. Still, I actually think the most important faction in The Last of Us Part 2 is the Fireflies.
My friend and I would argue whenever he called the Fireflies terrorists. We got a lot of detention.
They're kind of a touchstone of empathy in which everything else revolves around, not only reconciling with Joel's revenge, but their own revenge on a societal, cultural scale against Fedra. Every key player has a connection to the Fireflies in some way, and especially when it comes to the larger symbols of Fireflies, light, look for the light, moths, etc. They function as either hope or the lack thereof, and they're a good vehicle to begin to explore these ideas of crossing tribal bounds and trying to understand the other side right at the beginning with Eugene. Although he's dead by the time the game starts, he was obviously a chill and positive force in Ellie and especially Dina's lives, and until they find his secret hideout, they didn't know he was a Firefly. It gives them a new perspective on both him and the Fireflies, and reminds us of the things Tommy had done in the past. If Tommy and Eugene could be violent and ruthless, your enemies could be kind and sweet off the battlefield too. And Abby's transformation over her 3 days in Seattle builds off this with her better understanding of the Seraphites. But her initial, very tribalistic sense of the WLF beforehand is called into question by Owen, who reminds her of the radical ways of the Fireflies.
In the QZs, people would refer to the Fireflies as terrorists. Fanatics.
We were naive. We weren't fanatical.
We blew up checkpoints and assassinated soldiers.
And we see it when Abby and Mel discuss the kids throwing stones.
Strung up an entire squad.
That was in retaliation to us shooting those kids.
Okay, but those kids attacked our guys. What would you do?
I don't know, not riddle them with bullets?
I'd rather save our people.
Manny, they're kids. It's not their fault.
Not our fault either. Those deaths are on them.
I always find that conversation so interesting, because they work as opposites when it comes to Yara and Lev. Abby can say that, but still willingly care for the enemy kids, whereas Mel fights her while talking, but is obviously not cool with the fact that she brought the kids to the aquarium. And so we learn no faction is the ultimate good, but no faction, besides the Rattlers, is ultimately evil as well. But the most interesting part of The Last of Us is always the cycles, and we see how the cycle of violence is group-oriented as well as personal.
I mean, we're going through a lot of their people. In their city.
Because of what they did.
Didn't Abby and her friends come to Jackson because of something Joel did?
Especially with the WLF's reaction to Fedra's tyrannical ways. But by adopting that power, they adopted that force as well.
Try another truce? But how long before some asshole on their side, or our side, unravels the whole thing? No. It has to be all of them.
The cycle of violence comes into question specifically at the end of Ellie's birthday flashback, as she explores a second part of the museum where an ex-Firefly came to reconcile with his morality and kill himself. He writes these harrowing notes about the people he killed in the name of his cause before we get to his devastating suicide note. It's interesting here that these political reasons to fight relate much more to that of Bayek and Aya's journey, while Bayek and Aya have never been fazed by the violence they must commit in the way this man clearly had. Bayek has both a political and personal reason for revenge.
It is not peace that I seek. It is not for my soul that I walk this path.
But it's also a good distinction with how these games reconcile with the life and death of random people. I've talked about the power of NPCs' names being yelled in The Last of Us Part 2 in previous videos.
What are you doing?
Cutting them down.
Make sure the building's clear first.
I'm not leaving them up there.
What the fuck's cutting them down gonna do now? Go!
And in general, the game's portrayal of violence isn't fun per se, but it's narratively and tonally meaningful in a way that Assassin's Creed Origins never concerns itself. Even when it comes to fighting horrible people, the ones that killed your son or killed Shadia, it's an enjoyable and ultimately light combat experience. Origins isn't as interested in questioning the idea of what is good and evil, because we go up against some cartoonishly evil people, especially when it comes to the ways they hoard resources and abuse poor and colonized people. It reminds me of the ways that we can cheer on Captain America and Indiana Jones's killing of Nazis. Bayek is a superhero in a way, and it feels good to know you are literally always justified in killing people because they let you know how dastardly they are beforehand. Where death really does matter in Assassin's Creed Origins is the death of the average man, the innocents, and how we are clearly shown where and how much people are missed.
What good is a bracelet? My child will grow up without a father. Thank you for telling me. You are a good man. But please, leave me alone to my grief. I'm just another woman the Romans have made a widow. This is the war no one speaks of.
Both games look at lots of groups of people living their lives, and we can help them or not. But in The Last of Us Part 2, the right answer is to spare, whereas in Assassin's Creed Origins, it's to kill. Overall, in the ancient world of Origins, with the badge of honor Bayek wears, and the black and white ways morality functions, literally killing people solves problems in simpler, just, and necessary ways.
I cannot bring your people back from Duat, but I will help you avenge your village.
So how do the people of these worlds use revenge to their advantage, or bypass revenge altogether for a better life? How does hope and love play into their stories? Everyone has their own revenge. It's alluded to mostly through environmental storytelling and notes in The Last of Us Part 2, but in Assassin's Creed Origins we meet a variety of characters who send us on side quests, many of which are quests to act out that person's revenge. And helping others complete their revenge is Bayek's civic duty. And because of this, the killing of another person is not only the good decision, but is how people in that time and place can stand up against colonialism, extortion, racism, and abuse.
I had to do right by you. And now, I have. Thank you, Bayek. Shame there are so few Medjay left.
I think we see this best in the 2 side quests Bayek can complete for Kawit and her siblings. In our first quest, we meet her brother by chasing him through the streets at the promise of catching a young thief. But when we stop him, he asks for our help, finding his sister. He and Kawit were street urchins, taken in by a man named Neff, whose killing is later a reason for Kawit to seek her own revenge against Gaia Afrani, a Roman woman selling children into slavery.
I'm going to track down that Roman bitch who did this to my family.
When Kawit tries to save those kids, she's kidnapped, and our first quest is to free her. Our second quest is to kill Gaia for her, and when we're done, Bayek says this.
Kawit has her vengeance now. I hope it quiets her heart.
Rightfully killing her abuser, saving children's lives, it makes revenge feel satisfying and easy in this world. Not the act of killing itself, but the consequence. Coming back to Kawit, we can ask her to join Bayek's freedom fighting, a meaningful cause to plunge her anger into. That's true as well for Hotefres, who doesn't renounce his grieving but enhances it by remembering how to fight and kill.
That will bring Shadia back. No, but at least you'll have the comfort of revenge. We both will. Stop being useless. Be angry. Pick up your sword and start fighting.
We must shake off our grief. We cannot let others suffer too. Not when we can stop it. You were a fighter once. It is time to fight again.
Hotefres joining the fighting is standing up for himself, genuinely doing right by his daughter's memory, and Hanut is proud of him, feeling they can truly grieve in peace now. There's less distinction between saving, sacrificing, and assassinating people in the world of The Last of Us, but each action in Origins is vastly different. The whole point of the Brotherhood, of the Hidden Ones, is to do the right thing at any cost. And when you're playing ancient sociopolitical 3D murder chess, you have to know the difference. But some of the best side quests in Origins don't involve murder at all, and instead having you help and spread hope to the people of Egypt, like making sure tlou doesn't kill herself, and while escorting her back to her home, you meet a pack of hyenas and she says,
"Oh, but that was terrifying. Death isn't so desirable when you really see it. I guess I do want to live."
Or giving Tamhotep the materials for a spell to help with her pregnancy, ending and sharing with her the same Medjai's prayer he wished to share with his son. In general, this is true of the way Bayek interacts with and takes extra care and consideration with children, shown so sweetly and sadly at the end as he escorts a young boy home like he couldn't his son. Abby's arc is this to a T. Learning how to live a life where you can give love and care for others is the best revenge possible, and the best way to honor those you've lost. In both games, so much grief and hatred comes from characters' misplaced love. But we also see them bring that genuine care and tenderness into encounters as well as the coldness of violence.
When you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. What's that? Something my dad used to say.
No, it's fucking this. I know. But we can choose to be happy. Happy. We're allowed to be happy.
So before we end this discussion, let's take a broader step back and look at how revenge colors the larger mechanics of the games themselves. Both games are based around stealth, environmental puzzles, and parkour, and they're both about taking down a group of people who either did the killing or were complicit and present at the killing. But in Origins, half the battle is finding out who these people are. Fundamentally, the differences come from the intentions of tone and conventions of genre. Because The Last of Us Part 2's narrative is on wheels, and Assassin's Creed Origins is an open world, you have more options for differing playstyles that favor or ignore the main quest's revenge, which reminds me a bit of the ludonarrative dissonance in Fallout 4. Doing side quests while your character is crying about his son in every cutscene. Revenge is the single most important tenet of The Last of Us Part 2, whereas revenge in Origins is a piece of a much larger puzzle of colonialism, civic duty, political intrigue, and franchise world building. And you can't talk about The Last of Us Part 2 without the added layer of Abby, and how playing as her changes everything. It's such a radical move for a game to do, even a story to do, period, and it does it well. There are also 3 playable protagonists in Assassin's Creed Origins, but it doesn't do the same thing as Abby. And while I obviously wasn't expecting it to be as radical as that, it low-key didn't add enough for me either. I really wish we had gotten more time inside Aya's head. The Last of Us Part 2 is all about subverting the expectations of the player. Its dual revenge quests intertwine and breathe with one another, mirror and parallel so obviously, but so fully and tightly. It's a narrative that folds in on itself and comes back out. Love to hate to love. Ellie's corruption reciprocated by Abby's redemption, the Tommy sniper scene being a microcosm of that player expectation subversion. And no Assassin's Creed game tries to do this, but no Assassin's Creed game needs to do this either. As someone who had never played an entire Assassin's Creed game before this, I was really surprised at the levels of nuance and gravitas Origins was willing to portray, while still being able to create an incredibly fun and an incredibly historically accurate game. So of course Bayek's revenge was more clear-cut. The larger systems an Assassin's Creed game needs to hit, as well as the genuine difference in cultural climate between ancient times and now, allows it to explore a variety of stories and do so with little gray moral area, but that still harbors real truth. I'll leave you with something I was really taken by when it came to exploring these games further. This odd digital propensity to deal with grief through eternal life. Obviously, there are flashbacks to the dead characters we'll fight for in tlou, Joel, and Jerry, but both Origins and The Last of Us Part 2, at least remastered, offer game modes where we can bring these dead characters to life. There's something beautifully haunted in being able to possess tlou and run through the desert in the Discovery Tour mode, or being able to play with Joel and adult Ellie in the new No Return mode, hearing him literally being able to say the things Ellie wanted to hear throughout her entire runtime.
You alright?
Of course. Hey, I got you.
You gonna be okay?
We've been through worse.
There's a part of me that hopes their existence in some other nebulous state would help our protagonists, as it certainly helps us.
I will never stop mourning what we lost. Never. But I must make a world that is larger than our griefs, so that no mother ever again lives what I have lived.
Thank you so much for watching. What are your favorite revenge quests in gaming? Let me know or just leave your thoughts in the comments. I hope I did Bayek and the Assassin's Creed franchise some good, because it was my introduction to the series, so I know there are probably a lot of Easter eggs and narrative beats I don't totally get. I'm currently in the middle of 3 and Black Flag, so maybe you'll see more of these guys at some point soon. Anyways, if you like this video, I have a whole lot more like it. Make sure you like and subscribe, and maybe even put on that bell to get notifications every time I post. As always, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.